Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
It's Vanessa Denha-Garmo filling in for Teresa Tomeo here on this Tuesday, January 14th, on a cold day here in Southeast Michigan, and I'll give a forecast around the country in the news segment. We are a co-production of EWTN. Always a pleasure to sit here with you. Honored that Teresa trusts me in her host chair in EWTN and the team. We have two guests joining us here today. Really important topics as the March for Life is fast approaching. Jennie Bradley Lichter is the new president of the March for Life. She is replacing Jeannie Mancini, who recently stepped down after 12 years serving in that role. So we'll be talking with her about the March for Life coming up and her role, obviously, as the new president-elect at the March for Life Education and Defense Fund. Jennie Bradley Lichter was chosen as the president-elect of the March for Life Education and Defense Fund in 2024, and will assume the office of president of the organization February 1st of 2025 as a longtime marcher who began attending the National March as a college student in 2001. Jennie is humbled and honored by the opportunity to lead the March for Life. She has a wide-ranging legal and policy experience in public, private, and nonprofit sectors, including at the highest level of the federal government. During the Trump administration, Jennie served in the White House as the Deputy Assistant to the President and Deputy Director of the White House Domestic Policy, where she supervised rulemaking and policy efforts implicating a number of federal agencies and led policy initiatives across the federal government to defend the dignity of life. So prior to the White House service, Jennie worked on policy issues and federal judicial, including Supreme Court confirmation efforts in the Office of Legal Policy at the U.S. Department of Justice. She previously served as an in-house counsel for the Archdiocese of Washington. Early in her legal career, Jennie clerked for 2 federal appeals court judges and was an associate at the international law firm Jones Day. She formerly served as the Deputy General Counsel of the Catholic University of America. In addition to her legal work at the Catholic University, Jennie also founded and directs the Guadalupe Project, the university's campus-wide initiative support and lift up pregnant and parenting students, staff, and faculty. So we'll be talking with Jennie here today on Catholic Connection as Teresa will be heading to the March for Life and reporting for EWTN. And EWTN, as always, does wonderful coverage of the March for Life. I watch it every year on EWTN, and they do a fabulous job. So also joining us today, Tim Graham, executive editor of the Media Research Center Newsbusters, will be joining us talking about the meltdown about the Meta Facebook deciding on more, not less, free speech. And many other issues we'll be talking with him about. I'm going to see if I can pull up this one story that we'll be talking to you about. MSNBC suggests new Meta rules might lead to genocide and race massacres. Are you kidding me? NBC senior reporter on all things internet, Brandy Zedrazani, joined MSNBC's Stephanie Rule on Thursday's edition of the 11th Hour to discuss the Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg's decision to revive the company's rules of what constitutes acceptable speech. And they, went on to comment on what they thought about in the internet world. And as we know, if you haven't heard, Zuckerberg was on with Joe Rogan not too long ago outlining how he was pressured by the Biden administration to censor information during the COVID pandemic. And so now he's deciding to kind of model more of what X does and get rid of those third-party fact-checkers. And this commentary in Fox News is really enlightening on all the things that the Biden administration did, including calling, he claims to Joe Rogan, calling his office, talking to people at Facebook and his company, screaming at them to take information down that challenged the side effects of the vaccine. And Zuckerberg, was saying that, he refused to do that. Of course, he did do that. We know he did that. And many people commented on that. In fact, Teresa and I talked about that many times. I personally experienced being challenged by local reporters in Michigan for questioning the protocols during COVID. I had friends whose Facebook pages were taken down because they were questioning the government's protocols in COVID and questioning Fauci. I know doctors who were being challenged because they were questioning Fauci. Here in the state of Michigan, doctors' licenses were being threatened for prescribing certain drugs to combat COVID because it wasn't in line with their agenda pushing the vaccine. So we'll be talking with him about that. And as a communications leadership coach, this truth-telling is near and dear to my heart. I coach a lot on leadership development and communications within a workplace. In fact, I wrote an ebook on conversations that create the culture. And how we communicate, our conversations do create the culture within our workplaces, within our homes, within our church organizations, within the community at large. And we see this in social media. These lies, and it perpetuated a divide. There's a lot of toxic work environments because of how people communicate. And this is just an example of that. When you start censoring truth and you start challenging people and attacking people because they're trying to seek the truth, they're trying to ask questions, and reporters were going along with this. When I posted a post on Facebook during COVID, 2 doctors were being interviewed by an ABC affiliate in California, and they were challenging Fauci. I merely posted that interview on my Facebook page asking local doctors in Michigan to comment on what those doctors were saying, and I couldn't believe how many reporters got upset with me for posting that. And they challenged me, and they said, well, how dare you post that, and who are these doctors? I'm like, when did you take the opinion of one doctor as truth? I mean, as reporters, you always seeked out different experts and different opinions. Fauci wasn't the only infectious disease specialist. And so there were doctors challenging him. And as a reporter, you should ask yourself, well, why are doctors challenging him? What are they questioning him? But we didn't do that in this country, no. We criticized anybody who challenged the protocol of the government. And the truth always comes out, and Zuckerberg just came out and admitted it. That's exactly what they were being pressured to do, and he caved and he did it. Now, why he's coming out now to admit that they did that? Probably because of the political climate today and how America voted in the last election, and he saw all the red on the U.S. map in terms of the election results. So, just one of the many things we'll be talking about here with Tim Graham, executive editor of the Media Research Center, Newsbusters. So many stories to talk with him about Zuckerberg and this new policy and how the left is reacting to that. But communication is key. I truly believe that. It affects our relationships. It affects our cultures. It affects our work environments, our home environments. There's so many problems going on in different companies across this country because of how leadership communicates. And it's why I do these audits. And sometimes the discovery is really tough for them to accept, but they have to look at this objectively if they really want to improve their culture. And there also was a study, I actually wrote one of my Christ Center communication messages on this, about how people silently leave work. They quit their job silently. They don't even tell the HR department or the bosses why they leave, because they leave because of the bosses. Because the bosses don't know how to communicate. They don't know how to share information. They don't know how to keep people abreast of what's going on in the company. And so they feel duped. They feel insecure. They feel like they don't know what's happening there, and there's a lot of water cooler kibitzing going on and gossiping going on when right information is not shared. And Teresa and I talk about this all the time. If you don't tell your story, somebody else will. So it behooves leaders to communicate properly with their teams to keep them abreast of what's going on. Don't keep them in the dark. If there's major changes going on, new hires, new positions, people being let go, they need to know why and what's going on and why is it happening. And that's why asking questions is so important. It's 9 minutes past the hour here on Catholic Connection. I'm Vanessa Denha-Garmo, filling in for Teresa Tomeo. Now it's time for the news. 19 degrees right now in southeast Michigan, my hometown here near the Detroit area. Snow is continuing to fall here, 20 degrees in northern part of Michigan, which is kind of weird. It's a little warmer than the southern part. Cincinnati, a high of 30 degrees, cloudy skies. In Charlotte, 50 degrees. In Atlanta, 47 degrees and sunny skies. Jacksonville, Florida, 59 degrees and sunny. Tampa, it's cloudy and 67. Miami, it's going to be cloudy and 74 degrees. And when we look at the West Coast, and still praying for the wildfires and all the victims in the path of the wildfires in California. In San Francisco, however, it's sunny and 61 degrees. Los Angeles, it's 68 and sunny. Phoenix, 66 and sunny. Las Vegas, 57 and sunny. And we look at Seattle, 42 degrees and cloudy. In the East Coast and Boston, 32 degrees, sunny skies. New York, it's sunshine, 35 degrees. Washington, 35 and sunny, as well as Charlotte, 50 and sunny. Our news is brought to you by House of Joppa. Go to houseofjoppa.com. The National Weather Service is warning of high winds in Los Angeles, a development that could impede efforts to fight the devastating fires. Wind gusts could range from 40 to 70 miles per hour, coupled with low humidity, could further fuel the blazes that have left thousands of homes destroyed and at least 24 people dead. The warning described by the Weather Service's particularly dangerous situation goes into effect this morning for Los Angeles and Ventura counties. The auto fire in Ventura County has burned 56 acres of land and is contained. This woman says her son lives in the Santa Clara riverbed near the fire ignited.
He lives like right here along the edge. I've been trying to get his attention. Hopefully he can get out, They don't really pay attention. When they see cops and stuff, they freak out. And so, it's hard to get their attention when there's emergency personnel out here.
The fire is burning near the River Ridge Golf Course in Oxnard. It was the first reported in Santa Clara Riverbed at about 8 o'clock Monday night. Mandatory evacuation orders are in place between Ventura Road and Victoria Avenue. Though it's unclear how many homes are impacted, the fire is being fueled by strong Santa Ana winds. Governor Gavin Newsom is proposing the state of California provide another $2.5 billion in funding for response and recovery following the deadly wildfires in Los Angeles County. Daniel Martindale reports.
On Monday, Newsom signed a proclamation that expands the scope of the state legislature's current special session. The governor is requesting $1 billion more go toward emergency response, cleanup, and recovery, and he wants another $1.5 billion in funding to prepare for the threats of firestorms and other natural disasters in the future.
President Biden is announcing a one-time payment of $770 to each resident impacted by the L.A. area wildfires. Tammy Trujillo reports.
The amount is a standardized amount provided by FEMA's Serious Needs Assistance Program.
People impacted by these fires are going to receive one-time payment of $770, one-time payment, so they can quickly purchase things like water, baby formula, and prescriptions.
Biden was joined at his desk in the Oval Office by Vice President Harris and FEMA officials, among others. Biden has also vowed the federal government will cover 100% of the disaster response costs connected to the fires for the next 6 months. He said those affected can go to disasterassistance.gov.
The Senate will start confirmation hearings today by President-elect Trump's cabinet picks. NBC's Chris Pollone reports.
First up, military veteran and former Fox News host Pete Hegseth, picked to lead the Defense Department, who has repeatedly denied allegations of financial and sexual misconduct and alcohol abuse.
Former North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum was set to face questions to lead the Department of Interior, but his hearing has been delayed 2 days over missing paperwork. The Senate was also supposed to hold a hearing for Trump's pick to run the Department of Veterans Affairs. Former Georgia's Congressman Doug Collins. That's now postponed until January 21st because the FBI hasn't yet completed a background check. President Biden will give a farewell address to the nation this Wednesday, 5 days before he leaves office. Biden will speak from the Oval Office at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. He's expected to reflect on his time in office and talk to the country about the future. Most Americans say they didn't measure much progress during the Biden administration. Rory O'Neill reports.
Most Americans think the U.S. lost ground in 6 areas during the Biden presidency: federal debt, immigration, income inequality, global influence, and crime. The only area where Gallup measured progress was in LGBTQ rights. The survey measured stagnation for black people and environmental issues. Not surprisingly, Democrats were much more upbeat than Republicans over the Biden legacy.
One of more than 500 bills introduced during the first week of the 2025 Mississippi legislature last week would stiffen penalties for those convicted of helping minors obtain abortions. House Bill 148, sponsored by Republican Mark Toulos, would make a felony in Mississippi to help a minor get an abortion or access to the abortion-inducing drug without parental consent. Those found guilty could be sentenced to 20 years to life in prison. Debate on the Safeguarding Teens from Out-of-State Procedures Act is expected to get underway in committee this week. The risk of developing dementia may be higher than previously thought. NBC's Ann Thompson reports on a new study out there this week that estimates the risk at around 42% for both men and women.
This new number, a 42% risk of getting dementia after 55, scientists say is due in part to better tracking and the fact we're living longer. In fact, for women who live longer than men, the risk is now 48%.
Earlier studies had shown numbers at 14% for men, 23% for women. For Black Americans, the risk could be even higher. The study was published in the journal Nature Medicine. It's 15 minutes past the hour here on Catholic Connection. I'm Vanessa Denha-Garmo, filling in for Teresa Tomeo. We'll be right back after the break.
St. Francis Retreat Center in DeWitt is offering an all-new weekend men's retreat. Break open the parables. Available dates January 17th to the 19th or January 24th to the 26th. The suggested donation of $215 includes lodging and meals. Call 517-669-8321 or visit stfrancis.ws to register today. Use promo code Ave Maria for a free copy of Secret from Heaven by Father Sebastian Walsh.
People ask how they can care for older family members who can't fully care for themselves. One answer is Visiting Angels, America's choice in senior home care. Visiting Angels assists adults nationwide with 600 locations to continue living at home and not have to move into a nursing home. Their caregivers provide assistance in hygiene, meals, and light housework. Services are provided up to 24 hours per day, and you can select your caregiver before service begins. More information, including franchise opportunities, is on the web at visitingangels.com.
Light of the East, weekends on Ave Maria Radio.
I am Father Thomas Loya. This week on Ave Maria, as though being born and laid in a manger in Bethlehem was not humbling enough, our Lord chose to lower himself in the lowest spot on the earth's surface, the River Jordan. There he would be baptized for our sake, and God as Trinity would be revealed.
Now on Ave Maria Radio's newest FM stations, 105.5 FM in Southfield and 107.9 FM in Ann Arbor.
You are so much more than your cancer diagnosis. You're our inspiration. At Trinity Health, cancer care experts combine the latest research and technology with personalized support inspired by you and your unique journey. From diagnosis to treatment and beyond, we're here to guide you every step of the way with care that nurtures your body, mind, and spirit. Learn more at trinityhealthmi.org/cancer. Trinity Health. We see all of you.
And we're back here on Catholic Connection. I'm Vanessa Denha-Garmo. I have to say my name slow because people, I remember one time I was emceeing an event and I introduced myself and they're like, oh, your last name is two last names. I'm like, yeah, it's Denha. It's my maiden name. Garmo is my married name. Denha in Aramaic means epiphany. Garmo in Aramaic means bone. Bony, I think, a relic, I think. But I know our last name means Epiphany Denha. So joining us soon will be Jennie Bradley Lichter. She is the new president of March for Life. And she is replacing Jennie Mancini, who recently announced that she'd be stepping down after 12 years. So she's going to be joining us soon. Just a couple months ago, about 3 months ago, EWTN was kind of giving a commentary overview of what to expect at the March for Life. Now we're just a few days away. But Andrew has that clip. We wanted to play it as we wait for Jennie Bradley Lichter to join us. So go ahead, Andrew. Let's play that.
We are about 3 months away from the annual March for Life in Washington, D.C. And on Thursday, leaders released the official theme of the 2025 March. That theme is Every Life, Why We March. Jennie Mancini, president for the March for Life, hopes the theme encourages the pro-life movement amid confusion about abortion and upcoming ballot initiatives.
2.5 years after the overturn of Roe, that there are many who need to be reminded of the importance of like every sacrifice, of every act to build a culture of life. It really does make a difference, and we're living in a particular moment in history, which is the cultural reverberation of the earthquake of the overturn of Roe. And so, I mean, to lean into that, to know, being that one little light in a dark room, it makes a huge difference. So we want to do everything possible to encourage people in that direction.
Mancini says this theme is going back to the basics about the March for Life's purpose. EWTN is your home for complete coverage of the March for Life. This year, it will be held on Friday, January 24th. We will bring you on-the-ground reports from the rally and throughout the march, as well as provide analysis from pro-life experts throughout the day. Our coverage begins at 9 a.m.
And we know EWTN does a fabulous job covering so many stories, including the March for Life every year. And we know since that clip was shared, Jennie Mancini has stepped down, and we are now talking to the new president of March for Life, Jennie Bradley Lichter, joining us here on Catholic Connection. Congratulations, Jennie. It's a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you very much, and good morning. It's great to be with you.
So tell us about, you taking over as the president, what this means to you. You have a long history with the March for Life and the pro-life movement and the work that you have done. I read your bio earlier in the show. So tell us a little bit about what this means for you as we head into March for Life 2025.
Sure. Thanks for asking. It's so incredibly special and frankly almost inconceivable to me that I now have had the opportunity, have been called to step into leading the March for Life. Because you're right, the March for Life has been a part of my life for a long time, since I was a freshman in college, almost 25 years ago, when I came to my first March for Life on an overnight bus ride from South Bend to Indiana. I was at Notre Dame. And it had such a big impact on me. I grew up in a pro-life family, and I had always been pro-life, but being with tens of thousands of other people, and especially just thousands and thousands of young people, it made a really big impact on me. And I do think that trip, my first of many marches for life, is part of what kind of knit me into the pro-life movement, as it does for so many other people. So since then, I've attended lots of times with friends, and then I started bringing my husband once I was married, and now we bring our children. And now to have the opportunity to be a part of the team that really gives the great gift of the March for Life, is how I think about it, to the pro-life movement and the nation, is so special. So I just, I never would have dreamed on that day, almost 25 years ago, that I would someday have an opportunity to follow in Jennie's footsteps. So, that's God's providence for you, right?
Yeah, it is God providence, and God bless you for this work that you've been doing. And what should we expect this year at the March for Life, Jennie?
This is going to be a really great year. I mean, the March for Life is always a terrific day, but this year we have an absolutely fantastic lineup of speakers, ranging from politicians to longtime pro-life heroes to great musicians, and I'll have an opportunity to greet the crowd in my new capacity as well. The weather looks pretty good, which, sometimes it's not always a guarantee in Washington in January, but I think we're going to have a beautiful, clear winter day. And I think there's going to be just so much enthusiasm and optimism leading into a new presidential administration, and I think a really key, pivotal moment in our culture in building a culture of life.
Yeah, I was reading not too long ago that Governor Ron DeSantis will headline at the National March for Life. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, we're so excited that Governor DeSantis is able to join us because, I think he is a real pro-life hero. After a string of losses at the state level in different ballot measures where voters in a lot of different states for 2 years were voting against protections for the unborn, Governor DeSantis, when abortion was on the ballot in Florida this past fall, he and his wife, the First Lady of Florida, really went all in and put a lot of political capital into telling the voters of Florida the truth about what they were being asked to vote on. And I think they were able to just cut through all of the noise and all of the lies that were being told to voters about what their ballot measure would do. And Florida voters voted to protect life. And that's a great credit to the people of Florida and the truth being compelling, but it's also a credit to Governor DeSantis. So we're delighted that he's able to make the trip to D.C. and be with us.
So Jennie Bradley Lichter replacing Jeannie Mancini as the president of March for Life. You know, how do your two different presidencies in the organization complement each other and maybe a little different? What did you learn from her? What advice did she give you, kind of thing?
Yeah, great question. So Jeannie has been leading this organization for, almost 13 years. So I have been to so many marches where Jeannie Mancini is on the stage, and she's been such a great leader for the whole movement, not just this organization. Jeannie is so warm, and she just exudes the joy of the Lord. She has been a great model for me in how to speak with moral clarity, unflinching moral clarity, but also real compassion, just true, deep compassion for women who are suffering and for their families and for children. And that is hard to do, and Jeannie is just a master at it. So I've learned a lot from her already. I think just about how to talk about this hard issue in a way that, again, is compassionate but tells the truth. I've been able to work alongside her actually the last few months. I'm currently in president-elect capacity, and I'll officially become president right after the march. So I've learned so much from Jeannie about the organization.
We have to take a break. Sorry, Jennie, we have to take a break here on Catholic Connection. We'll be right back after this. Jennie Bradley Lichter has been with us here on Catholic Connection, President-elect for March of Life, as Jeannie Mancini steps down, and she's official president on February 1st, right after the march. And, Jennie, this is really exciting. I'm so grateful that EWTN does the extensive coverage they do of the March for Life every year. Teresa Tomeo will be there, of course, because so many of us can't go, although there are tons of people there, and the secular media never really show the huge crowds and the wonderful speakers. So speak to that coverage, and then we'll talk about the theme itself and the wonderful speakers you'll have in addition to Governor DeSantis that we talked about. So let's talk about the EWTN coverage. How important is that for you?
It's so important because, this is a big country, of course, and there's dedicated pro-life people all over the United States. And for many of them, it's just not feasible to come to Washington, D.C. on the East Coast in the middle of January or in late January. So we're so grateful for EWTN that they make it possible for pro-life people, committed people all over the country to participate in the march by being able to watch the live feed. And as you said, it fills a gap because year after year after year, the mainstream media gets away with either totally ignoring or downplaying the really incredible scope of this event, which is the world's largest annual human rights demonstration. There's nothing in the world like the March for Life, and that story doesn't get told by the mainstream media. Yeah, and Teresa and I have talked about that. They'll even show camera angles where the crowd doesn't look large. I mean, it's so strategically done. So tell us about the theme this year. So the theme this year is Life, Why We March, and as Jeannie described it, we're getting back to pro-life basics, and we essentially wanted to use the theme to offer an opportunity for our marchers to tell their pro-life stories. And we've our social media team has done a really neat campaign where people have submitted their stories about why they march, whether it's in Washington or their hometown or whatever. And we've been sort of retweeting and sharing some of those stories. And the pro-life movement is so beautiful and big, and it is so diverse. And everyone has a little bit of a different take on their personal story or their own personal commitment and how they articulate it. So the theme this year is really just, look, we're marching for the beauty and dignity of every human life, and everybody who makes a point of coming to Washington for this event has a story to tell about why they're here. And every one of those people is a pro-life hero in their own right.
Yeah. You know what I love about the March for Life, too, is that the people at all stages of their life, at all ages, a lot of high schoolers go. I know there's many kids from our area in Southeast Michigan. Their high schools go. Tell us about that, the youth going, the teenagers and the young college students.
Yeah, I think this is really one of the most remarkable things about the March for Life, and I'm glad you brought it up. There are tens of thousands of people there every year, and some are people who have come for 50 years, and that's incredibly moving. It's so beautiful. But a big portion of the crowd are high school and college students who come in groups, some of them like me on overnight bus rides, And they bring so much energy and enthusiasm to the March for Life, and they love life. And it is so, I find it so touching to see their handmade signs and their signs that say, I am the pro-life generation, and to know that in that crowd there are future leaders of the pro-life movement. It's an incredible thing about the march. And again, another way in which there's nothing like the March for Life.
So, Jennie, tell us, for people listening who are going to the March for Life for the first time this year, what advice do you have for them?
Dress warmly. You know, you can get little hand warmers to put even in your gloves or in your shoes. But again, I think the weather's going to be good to us this year. I would also say, if you can, come down to the rally site in time to catch a little bit of the band and to hear the speakers. I know for some people, you know, you kind of hop into the march as it's walking down the street, and I've done that myself some years when that's kind of how my logistics worked out. But being with that big crowd near the Washington Monument, which is where we're going to be this year, to pick up that energy and just feel so encouraged and affirmed by it, I think is really special. So I would just encourage everyone to come down and do the whole thing, soup to nuts, wear your winter clothes and bring your hand warmers and join us. I'll be there all day.
So, Jennie, we talked a little bit. I read a little bit of your bio earlier, and you talked about how you started getting involved in the pro-life movement back in college. But you have an amazing background working for the Trump administration and the work you've done in the judicial area, working for the Department of Justice. How did all of that years of experience prepare you for the role today as the president for the March for Life?
Yeah, so, you know, it's amazing looking back with the eyes, you know, sort of eyes opened by grace and thanking God for his providence. I do see now that it's essentially everything I've done in my 20-year career in Washington, 15 of which have been, you know, years as a lawyer, have been preparing me for this job. And in part, that's because I've worked as a lawyer for nonprofit organizations and learned a little bit about how nonprofits operate. But yes, I've also been doing years of pro-life legal and policy work, including as a senior policy advisor in the Trump White House, where I was really in the weeds and on the front lines, in the trenches, on some key pro-life victories in the last administration. And that was immensely valuable for me as well, especially going into another Trump administration where I think we will see some great wins put on the board for life. And I think the March for Life organization will be a big part of that policy conversation in the next few years.
Yeah, and despite Roe v. Wade being overturned, the work is still not over. As we know, a lot of things have happened or are happening at the state level. In fact, here in the state of Michigan, we have the horrible proposal that got passed that is way worse than what Roe v. Wade gave us. In fact, we lost parental consent on a lot of these issues. So what would you want to share with our listeners and what we can do every single day to kind of educate people on the pro-life movement? It is a tough topic, and it causes a lot of tense conversations, and people don't want to have these conversations.
That's right. It can be a hard thing to talk about, including with people that we're close to who maybe have a different view. And as you said, in a lot of states where this has been on the ballot recently, I know the conversations surrounding that have been really tense in your states. But I would just encourage people to take a lot of peace and confidence from knowing that this is a truly righteous cause, and that, of course, we know Christ has already won the victory. And we just kind of need to catch up, right? Life wins. Life will win, and we just need to catch up. So be confident, be bold, but speak with compassion. You never know what wounds people are carrying into these conversations, maybe even that they're not sharing. But life is beautiful, and I think just speaking to that, every life has value no matter the circumstances, and the pro-life movement loves and supports women. And I think all of us, no matter where we live, maybe could give ourselves a little challenge or an action item to just get familiar with the resources for pregnant women in your area, so that if you ever do have a moment where someone comes to you with an unexpected pregnancy or needs some advice, you know exactly where to send them, because every community across the country has some resources for pregnant women, and we need to be telling that story as well.
We're talking with Jennie Bradley Lichter here, President-elect of the March for Life, and she will be officially taking over as president February 1st after the March for Life here in Washington, D.C. Any last words you want to share with our listeners here on Catholic Connection? What else do you want them to know about the March for Life, and what goes on throughout the year after the March every year? About a minute left with you here.
Thanks, sure. Yeah, so please keep our team in your prayers. We have actually quite a small team that's working really hard to put the March for Life, behind the scenes to put the March for Life together and make it a great day for all of our marchers. So please pray for my strong but mighty little team. We're so excited for the next 2 weeks. But it's a heavy lift for us. I would also just let people know there are Marches for Life in states all across the country. So I'll be on the road a lot this spring, speaking at marches across the country, and we'd love to see people there.
Great. Jennie Bradley Lichter, thank you so much for joining us here on Catholic Connection. Stay with us, everyone. Tim Graham, executive editor of the Media Research Center's Newsbusters, will be joining us. We'll be back after this. Back here on Catholic Connection, Vanessa Denha-Garmo filling in for Teresa Tomeo this morning. Talking now with Tim Graham, executive editor of the Media Research Center's Newsbusters. And I was just talking about the Mark Zuckerberg story, talking with Joe Rogan, a lot going on with the new rules and the commentary from the left. MSNBC suggests new meta rules might lead to genocide and race massacres. I mean, talk about gaslighting. Talk to us about this, Tim, and your reaction to this and what you're covering.
Well, so much of cable news is about speculating what's going to happen next, not what just happened. You'd like to think a news channel would do what just happened.
Yeah.
But, they're going to take an event like this and say it's going to lead to genocide. And, it is the sort of thing that people say, how can you watch this stuff? Because sometimes it's amusing.
Like The View.
It is,
The View.
Right.
You watch the clips because it's so ridiculous it's amusing. Yes.
The only thing that's disturbing about that show is that people take them seriously.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
They're not exactly deep thinkers. But yeah, it's really good news in the new year that for whatever motivation, Mark Zuckerberg would say, I'm canning the fact checkers. Because people will tend to say, well, if you're against the fact checkers, you must be hostile to facts. And it's like, this is the whole point. This is the whole racket, which is to set up groups that are Democratic Party adjuncts. I mean, because when you study them, that's what you find.
Yeah.
They're out there to protect the Democrats and the left. Mm-hmm. And so it's just like the news media in general. They claim to have an authority and an objectivity that they do not possess and really don't care to possess. And so this was good news because, yes, a community note system is a better system for hashing out what's factual and non-factual and not having some partisans come in and say, well, you can't say anything negative about Biden.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting that you say that because I know members of the media across the board and different outlets in print and broadcast across the country because I've been in this business for so long and I was a full-time reporter. And I've had people tell me, like, in one news outlet, their fact checker was somebody who worked for Bernie Sanders at one point. Another person told me that their fact checker was if it made the Democrats look bad, it didn't go on the air, and if it made Trump look good, it never went on the air. That's what their so-called fact checkers were. So, I mean, and I've heard this from people working inside. So what is your take on Zuckerberg's new approach? It looks like he's modeling his approach on what X is doing.
That's certainly what it looks like, and it's more small d democratic. It doesn't rely on the reign of capital E experts. And, as you suggest, I always throw out the PolitiFact stats because they have all these cutesy labels like pants on fire versus, true. Well, when you do a pants on fire count, Donald Trump's at like 204 pants on fire, liar.
Yeah.
Kamala Harris had 0.
Wow.
She was elected to statewide office in 2010.
Wow.
And she has 0.
Yeah.
So Joe Biden has 7.
Yeah.
And only 1 as president of the United States. And so that's where you just say, this is a weapon. It's a weaponized system.
Yeah.
And people need to look at the facts about how the fact checkers target politicians. And we found, for example, in the first 9 months of 2024, PolitiFact had tagged the Republican candidates and officials and office holders as mostly false or worse 82% of the time, and the Democrats 41% of the time. So you were the percentage was twice as high. When you actually count the actual fact checks, it's 3 times as often the Republicans are described as mostly false or worse than the Democrats, because the Democrats get fewer fact checks.
Yeah. And we saw that during the presidential debate, too, as well, from ABC. And, it's one thing that MSNBC that, sounds as false alarm, but then you have PBS, which is funded by tax dollars. Warren Zuckerberg's free speech move may pave the way for a spike in misinformation. And so they're jumping on this bandwagon, and they're paid by tax dollars, and they're obviously act more like a PR arm of the left than they are as objective journalists in many cases.
Yeah, Vanessa, this is one of those things where people should know that in 2024, PBS and PolitiFact became partners, and the PolitiFact editor would come on during the conventions, for example, and correct the Republicans. And so this is part of the problem, is that our tax dollars go to Washington into something called the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and they're pumping it out to PBS and to NPR stations. They're very closely aligned with the PolitiFacts and the other media fact-checking organizations, and so it's not surprising at all that they would warn, "Oh no, PolitiFact's being defunded." Well, here's what comes next: the Republicans get their act together and cut funding for the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, because there's no need in this country for a publicly funded Democrat propaganda network.
Yeah, so Tim, we're talking with Tim Graham, executive editor of the Media Research Center's Newsbusters, and there's a lot of talk on defunding PBS. I mean, realistically, do you think that's going to happen?
Well, they've been around a long time, so the odds. The Republicans moved right after Newt Gingrich was elected to the House. It's been moved before. We certainly talked about it at the beginning of Donald Trump's first term. So I wouldn't be wildly optimistic, but, I do think the Republicans recognize the injustice that this represents. It's not just a political problem. It's an injustice, because if half of America is sending their tax dollars for this news outlet, it should be the most nonpartisan, fair, and balanced thing you've ever seen.
Yes.
And it's exactly the opposite of that.
Exactly. We're talking with Tim Graham. We've got to take a break here on Catholic Connection. We're going to continue our conversation with the executive editor of Media Research Center's Newsbusters. Stay with us, everyone.
Resetting your password, unsubscribing from emails, printing anything. Why are simple things sometimes so complicated? Thankfully, with an auto owner's insurance independent agent, getting the right coverage for your business doesn't have to be one of them, so you can get back to more important things, like learning how that printer works. That's simple human sense.
Call Choice Insurance Agency at 734-641-4200.
I might have gone to church, at Christmas time, gradually quit going. It's not as scary as I thought it was. It's a much more warm and open place, and God really is about love. It's not about the rules and the things that I remember as a young child. It really is about the love that God has for each one of us that's so deep and wonderful.
If you've been away from the Catholic Church for any reason, visit CatholicsComeHome.org.
Missed the name of the guest on today's Catholic Connection or his or her book? Log on to AveMariaRadio.net. Click Archive in the upper right corner. Select and search Catholic Connection and explore from there. You can hear past episodes, delve into bios, read related articles, purchase books, and find links to websites, all by clicking on the show notes from each hour. Browse AveMariaRadio.net and bookmark it today. That's AveMariaRadio.net.
Do you own popular index mutual funds or ETFs? If so, you're automatically owned shares of companies that conflict with your moral beliefs. Ave Maria mutual funds are managed to conform to pro-life and pro-family values. Long-term investors can invest in the no-load Ave Maria mutual funds. The experienced professional portfolio managers make decisions based on investment fundamentals and pro-life values. You can learn more about Ave Maria Mutual Funds today at 866-AVE-MARIA or visit AveMariaFunds.com.
Tim Graham's been with us here on Catholic Connection, executive editor of the Media Research Center's Newsbuster, talking about some stories as it relates to the Biden administration and reaction by MSNBC of Zuckerberg getting rid of the fact checkers. And one of the things that was something that was surprising but not so surprising, Tim, was Zuckerberg on Rogan's show admitting that Biden administration would scream and curse at his employees demanding censorship. Now, we all knew that, many of us knew that they were censoring people, and especially during COVID and the pandemic. Many of us had our Facebook posts taken down or our pages taken down because of commentary. And now Zuckerberg, and as I say, the truth always comes out, and Zuckerberg admits they were being pressured. So talk to us about this story.
Well, and Zuckerberg's told this story before to some extent. He was saying it in 2022. I mean, but I think taking this extraordinary step of saying, you know what, I'm going to risk upsetting the media by firing the fact checkers, it really is surprising. And what's so funny about this to me is this is a man who put billions of dollars or millions of dollars, into, we called them Zuckerbucks, trying to help turn out blue areas for Biden in the 2020 election. I hope he feels sorry that he did that. Mm-hmm. And that's where it is easy. There's a lot of conservatives out there saying, well, he's just doing this because he's twisting in the wind and he's got his finger in the wind. Okay, it's probably true. I laugh at the lefties going, he's gone full MAGA. But the fact of the matter is, yes, he's probably adjusting the conditions, and you can say, watch him change again in 4 years. Maybe he will. But the point is, at this particular time, it is a time for us to reevaluate and for us to be able to say, you people need to understand the fact checkers are remarkably biased. This is not a question mark. Are they biased or are they not biased? Anybody who's looking at them and reading them know they're biased. That's why the liberals love them. That's why George Soros is giving them money. Everybody on the left knows what they are. And so, I'm laughing right now looking at an MSNBC.com piece where they said, Zuckerberg is deregulating fact-checking and getting rid of hate speech management.
Oh, God.
Hate speech management.
Oh, my gosh. Okay.
That's called suppressing conservatives.
Yeah. Let me just tell you something, too. Forget the COVID vaccine. I know for a fact, and it's happened to me, even people posting stuff on the faith, their posts were taken down. Prayers were taken down. And when I commented on that one time on social media, there was a local reporter who said, that's absolutely not true. I'm like, who are you to say that's not true? Why don't you ask the people whose posts were taken down? I said, I know. I said, have you posted anything that's religious or faith-based that were taken down? She goes, well, no. I go, then how do you know that's not true? I mean, it was just like they automatically just did not want to believe that was happening. And this wasn't even post about COVID or the vaccine. People were just posting faith-based stuff, and their posts were taken down.
Well, and look, you can look at the way, if we talk about COVID, the way that the media managed their hate management. No, but the way that they managed this to say, well, conservatives or Catholics organizing in a protest is a super spreader event, very dangerous. Okay, well, there's a rally today for Black Lives Matter. Well, that's not
okay.
A super spreader.
Yeah. With our governor marching hand in hand in Detroit on Black Lives Matter, but we couldn't go to church. You know what I mean? So, I mean, it was just such hypocrisy.
Where's the science?
Yeah.
That's where they're like, you guys are anti-science. No, we're anti the exploitation of the mantle of science to enact your political or anti-religious agenda.
Yeah, and I blame the media because the media went along with it. Going back to NPR, they acted like the PR arm of the left instead of asking the questions. In fact, when I challenged people on social media, reporters were the first to say, well, why are you questioning? I'm like, why aren't you not? Why are you not questioning? Like, what are you talking about? You're questioning me for questioning these elected leaders. Why aren't you questioning them? Because this is such hypocrisy. I mean, Breitbart, another article you shared with me, disinformation experts slam Meta decisions to end U.S. fact-checking. So it's all over. I mean, they're trying to slant us in a way that this is horrible, and this came out before they were all going after X and Elon Musk, trying to take down X because they say it's misinformation, and we have to control social media. I mean, that is not a country that allows freedom of speech. That is a dictatorship, and you had elected leaders saying that, including AOC.
Yes, and so they always call themselves the experts. Disinformation experts say you have to give millions to PolitiFact, or else you're. We had this yesterday where one of these fact checkers came out and said, "We are like the firefighters," and that is the most insulting thing to people actually fighting dangerous fires. I was joking. The fact checkers don't even go outside. There's they run the pants on fire department, but what are they risking? Don't compare yourselves to firefighters. That's just insulting. And then, of course, Jimmy Kimmel is trying to compare them to health inspectors. I'm like, well, at least in that case, looking for cockroaches is not dangerous like being in a wildfire.
Yeah, exactly. And the problem is it comes down to who are the fact checkers. That's the problem. The fact checkers are not unbiased. They're biased. They have an agenda. So what makes them qualified to be fact checkers? That's the biggest problem.
Yeah, and so we were talking, you were mentioning the guy that worked for Bernie Sanders. Now, you could do this. You could be somebody who had a background in Republican politics or a background in Democratic politics, and you could be very scrupulous and say, I check everybody. You can do that. They just don't. They act like the Bernie Sanders bureaucrat. And that's because I think I could do it. If one of these fact checkers was like, hey, let's bring on Graham to try to be objective, that ought to be amusing. I think we could do that. But part of the problem is you have to not treat opinions like you're opinion checking or you're spin spoiling. You're saying, I don't like your argument, so I'm going to say it's unfactual. That's part of the problem. If it's something objective like Donald Trump said he had the largest crowd at his inauguration, it's quite easy to prove that's not true. Okay, but see, pick the easy stuff and don't say, for example, Trump called Kamala Harris a communist, and they called that pants on fire. But these people spent years calling Trump a fascist. Try to find a fact check.
Yeah, exactly, Tim Graham. Great point. And if we had real journalists instead of activists in the media, we wouldn't need nearly these fact checkers they claim that we need. Tim Graham, thank you so much for being with us here on Catholic Connection.
Hey, my pleasure.
And thanks all of you for tuning in. Thanks, Jennie Bradley Lichter, for joining us here, and Vanessa Denha-Garmo filling in for Teresa Tommy. I'll be back in our host chair tomorrow. Have a blessed day, everyone, here on Catholic Connection.
You've been listening to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo. Catholic Connection is a co-production of Ave Maria Radio and EWTN Radio and carried across the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. Our producer is Andrew Kruchek. For copies of this program or for more information, visit AveMariaRadio.net. That's AVEMariaRadio.net. Thanks for listening, and join us next time for another edition of Catholic Connection.